Lena Voss stood at this altar in a dress worth more than most people's lives, about to marry a man she'd met exactly once. Damien Falco didn't smile, didn't pretend. He looked at her the way someone examines a signature before closing a deal, cold, efficient, already moving on to the next transaction. Her father had sold her to erase his debts. Her mother hadn't even come to say goodbye. And the man now sliding a platinum band onto her trembling finger had made one thing brutally clear. This wasn't a wedding, it was a hostile takeover. If you want to see how far a woman can fall before she learns to fight back, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The chapel smelled like old money and fresh lilies. Lena thought that was fitting. One was rotting from the inside out. The other would be dead by morning. She stood perfectly still in the marble entryway, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white beneath the lace gloves. The dress her mother-in-law had chosen, because of course Lena hadn't been consulted, was stunning in the way a gilded cage is stunning. All structure, no warmth. The bodice cut into her ribs with every breath, reminding her that beauty, in this world, always came with conditions. Through the heavy wooden doors she could hear the murmur of voices. Not many. This wasn't that kind of wedding. No childhood friends, no distant cousins weeping into handkerchiefs, just the people who mattered in transactions like these, lawyers, accountants, and men whose handshakes could topple governments. Her father hadn't even looked at her this morning. Lena closed her eyes and tried to remember the last time he had. Really looked at her. Not past her, not through her, but at her, the way fathers in movies looked at their daughters. She came up empty. Miss Voss? She turned. The woman standing behind her was older, sharp-featured, with silver hair pulled back so severely it seemed to stretch her face. Isabella Falco, Damien's mother. She held herself like royalty, all rigid posture and unreadable expressions. "It's time," Isabella said. Not gently, just a statement of fact. Lena nodded. Her throat felt tight. Isabella's gaze swept over her once, clinical and assessing. "You look appropriate." Not beautiful, not lovely. Appropriate. Lena wanted to laugh or scream. She wasn't sure which. The doors opened. The chapel was smaller than she'd expected. Intimate, almost. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting fractured colors across the marble floors, reds and golds and deep, bruised purples. The pews were half empty. On one side sat her father and a handful of his remaining associates, men who'd watched him gamble away everything and done nothing to stop it. On the other side sat the Falcos. More of them. Broader shoulders, harder eyes. And at the front, standing beside a priest who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, was Damien. Lena's breath caught. She'd met him once, 3 weeks ago, in her father's study, while the two men discussed her like she was a stock option. Damien hadn't said much. He'd sat in the leather chair across from her father's desk, one ankle crossed over his knee, and listened. When he finally looked at her, it was brief, evaluating. Then he turned back to her father and said, "Fine." That was it. Fine. Now, watching her walk toward him, his expression hadn't changed. He wore a black suit tailored so precisely it looked like armor. His dark hair was pushed back from his face, revealing sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. He was handsome in the way a blade is handsome. Clean lines, cold purpose. His eyes were the worst part. Pale gray, almost colorless. They didn't soften when she reached him. Didn't warm. They just assessed. Like he was calculating her value down to the decimal. Lena stopped at his side. The priest cleared his throat. "We are gathered here today." "Let's skip the speech," Damien said. The priest blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The vows. Just the vows." A muscle in the priest's jaw twitched, but he nodded. "Very well." Lena's hands were shaking. She clasped them tighter, but it didn't help. Damien noticed. Of course he did. His gaze flicked down to her trembling fingers, then back to her face. No sympathy, just observation. "Do you, Damien Falco, take this woman?" "I do." Flat, immediate, like signing a contract. The priest turned to her. "And do you, Lena Voss?" "She does," her father called from the pews. Lena's head snapped toward him. He wasn't even looking at her. He was checking his watch. The priest hesitated. Miss Voss? Her voice came out quieter than she wanted. I do. Damien reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black box. He opened it with one hand, revealing 2 platinum bands. He took hers first, thin, unadorned, cold, and reached for her hand. Lena flinched. It was involuntary. Barely noticeable. But Damien paused, his fingers hovering an inch from hers. For a second, something flickered across his face. Not anger, not impatience. Something harder to name. Then it was gone. He took her hand. His grip was firm, but not rough. He slid the ring onto her finger in one smooth motion, then released her immediately, like touching her any longer than necessary was a violation of terms. Lena picked up his ring with trembling fingers. It was heavier than hers. Thicker. She had to steady her other hand beneath it to keep from dropping it. When she slid it onto his finger, he didn't react at all. Just stood there, waiting for it to be over. By the power vested in me, the priest said, his voice tight, I now pronounce you husband and wife. He didn't say the part about kissing. Damien didn't move to kiss her. Instead, he turned toward the doors and offered her his arm. Lena stared at it. We have a car waiting, he said. His voice was low, smooth, empty of inflection. Take my arm or don't. Either way, we're leaving in 30 seconds. She took his arm. They walked down the aisle together in silence. No one clapped. No one threw rice. Her father didn't even stand. The Falcos watched her like wolves sizing up fresh meat, and Lena kept her chin up, kept her breathing even, kept moving forward because stopping would mean breaking, and she couldn't afford to break. Not yet. The car was a black sedan with tinted windows. A driver in a dark suit held the door open. Damien gestured for her to get in first. She did. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Damien slid in beside her, and the door closed with a soft, final click. The driver got in. The engine purred to life. They pulled away from the chapel, and Lena watched through the window as Rome blurred past. Ancient buildings, cobblestone streets, people living normal lives. She would never be one of them again. You can relax, Damien said. She turned to him. He wasn't looking at her. He was scrolling through his phone, his expression unreadable. Relax? She repeated. You're gripping the door handle like I'm about to throw you out of a moving vehicle. He glanced at her briefly. I'm not. Lena looked down. Her fingers were white-knuckled around the handle. She forced herself to let go. Better, Damien said, and went back to his phone. Lena stared at him. Is that it? Is what it? The wedding, everything. Is that it? He pocketed his phone and finally looked at her fully. What were you expecting? I don't know. Something. Like what? Champagne? A toast? His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. This isn't a romance, Lena. It's a merger. Your father owed mine 3 million euros and a supply route he couldn't deliver. You were the settlement. Clean, simple, legally binding. Her stomach turned. You're talking about me like I'm cargo. You're not cargo, Damien said. Cargo has value before it's loaded. You became valuable the moment you signed the papers. She felt her face go hot. You're a bastard. Yes, he said it without emotion. And you're my wife. Those are the facts. The sooner you accept them, the easier this will be. Easier for who? Both of us. The car turned onto a highway. The city fell away behind them, replaced by rolling hills and sprawling estates. Lena watched the landscape change and tried to breathe through the tightness in her chest. Where are we going? She asked. Sicily, my estate there. We'll stay for a few months. Why? Damien didn't answer immediately. He looked at her for a long moment, his pale eyes unreadable. Then he said, Because there's a clause in our contract you weren't told about. Lena went very still. What clause? We have a year to produce an heir. If we don't, the marriage is void and both families forfeit everything. He said it like he was reciting a grocery list. Your father knew. He didn't think you needed to. The world tilted. An heir, Lena repeated slowly. Yes. You mean a child. That's generally what heir implies. Her voice came out strangled. And if I refuse, then we both lose. Damien leaned back against the seat, utterly calm. Your father loses what's left of his assets. My family loses the route we bought you for. You lose your name, your standing, whatever pathetic safety net you think you still have. I lose, well, less than you, but enough to be inconvenient. Lena's hands curled into fists in her lap. This is insane. This is business. This is my life. It was your life, Damien corrected. Now it's ours. And we both have obligations. She wanted to scream, to throw open the door and run, even though they were going 80 on a highway and it would kill her. Anything felt better than sitting in this pristine cage next to a man who spoke about her body like it was company property. But she didn't scream, didn't run, because somewhere beneath the shock and the rage and the crushing weight of everything she'd just lost, a colder, sharper part of her was waking up. If this was a game, she wouldn't play it on her knees. What happens after the year? She asked quietly. Damien glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Hard to tell. If we fulfill the terms, the contract converts to a standard marriage. You stay. We raise the child. You become part of the family. And if I want out after the year, then you leave. With nothing. Nothing? Nothing, Damien repeated. No money, no name, no protection. You walk away exactly as valuable as you were the day your father sold you. He tilted his head slightly. Which is to say, not at all. Lena looked out the window. The hills were greener now, dotted with olive trees and vineyards. Beautiful, in a distant sort of way, like a postcard from someone else's life. Understood, she said. Good. They didn't speak for the rest of the drive. The estate was massive. Lena had grown up in privilege. Her father's house in Florence had been old money, all marble staircases and inherited paintings. But this was different. This was power, the kind that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. The main house sat on a hill overlooking the sea, surrounded by gardens that looked like they'd been designed by someone who thought nature was a rough draft. Stone pathways wound through manicured hedges. Fountains trickled. Somewhere in the distance, Lena could hear the ocean. The driver opened her door. She stepped out, and the heat hit her immediately, dry, Mediterranean, unforgiving. Damien was already walking toward the house. Keep up, he said without looking back. Lena followed. Inside, the house was cool and shadowed. High ceilings, tiled floors, furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable. A woman in a black dress appeared from a side hallway, her hands folded in front of her. This is Maria, Damien said. She manages the house. If you need anything, ask her. Maria nodded politely. Welcome, Mrs. Falco. The name hit Lena like a slap. Mrs. Falco. Not Lena. Not even Miss Voss. Just a title. A role. Thank you, Lena managed. Damien was already moving again, heading for a staircase that curved up toward the second floor. Your room is upstairs, third door on the left. Dinner is at 8. Don't be late. Wait, Lena called. Where's your room? He paused at the base of the stairs and looked back at her. End of the hall. We're not... She stopped herself. Sharing? Damien finished. No, not unless it's necessary. Necessary. For the terms of this contract. His expression didn't change. When the time comes, I'll let you know. He turned and walked upstairs without waiting for a response. Lena stood in the foyer, alone except for Maria, who was watching her with quiet sympathy. Would you like me to show you to your room, Mrs. Falco? Maria asked gently. Lena nodded. She didn't trust her voice. The room was beautiful. That was the worst part. Soft cream walls, a 4-poster bed with linen so white it almost hurt to look at. French doors that opened onto a balcony overlooking the gardens and the sea beyond. Fresh flowers on the dresser. A closet already filled with clothes. Her size, her style, all chosen by someone who'd never met her. Lena walked to the balcony and stepped outside. The air smelled like salt and lavender. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It was perfect, and she hated every inch of it. She gripped the balcony railing and tried to breathe, tried not to think about her father's face when he'd handed her over, tried not to think about Damien's cold, clinical voice, tried not to think about the word air and what it meant and what it would cost her. A knock at the door startled her. Yes? She called. Maria's voice came through the wood. Dinner in 1 hour, Mrs. Falco. Thank you. Footsteps retreated down the hall. Lena looked down at herself. The wedding dress was still on. She hadn't even thought to take it off. She reached behind her back, fumbling with the tiny buttons. There were too many. Her fingers were shaking too hard. She gave up. Instead, she sank down onto the edge of the bed and stared at the ring on her finger. Thin, cold, a perfect fit. For the first time since the chapel, she let herself cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, exhausted tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand before they could stain the silk. When the hour was up, she washed her face, pulled herself together, and went downstairs. Barbasen. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 20. There were only 2 place settings, one at each end of a long, polished table. Candles flickered between them, but they didn't make the room feel warm, just highlighted how far apart they were. Damien was already seated. He'd changed into a dark shirt, unbuttoned at the collar. He looked up when she entered, but didn't stand. Sit, he said. Lena sat. Maria brought the first course, some kind of seafood, delicate and artfully plated. Lena picked up her fork. Put it down. Picked it up again. If you're not hungry, don't eat, Damien said. He was cutting into his fish with surgical precision. But you should. You look like you're about to faint. I'm fine. You're not. He glanced at her. But I'm not going to force you. They ate in silence. Or rather, he ate. Lena pushed food around her plate and tried to figure out how she'd ended up here. Every decision her father had made, every risk he'd taken, every stupid, selfish gamble, and she was the one paying for it. You're angry, Damien said. Lena looked up. Wouldn't you be? Probably. Then why do you sound so calm? Because anger without strategy is just noise. He set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, studying her. What do you want, Lena? What? It's a simple question. What do you want? She stared at him. I want to go home. You don't have one anymore. Then I want out of this. You can't have that either. He tilted his head slightly. So what do you actually want? Something attainable? Lena's throat tightened. I don't know. Then figure it out. Damien stood, dropping his napkin onto the table. Because if you spend the next year sulking, it's going to be a very long year for both of us. He walked out. Lena sat alone at the table, staring at the empty chair where he'd been. Then she stood, smoothed her dress, and went back to her room. The first week passed in a haze. Lena learned the rhythms of the house. Breakfast at 7, lunch at 1, dinner at 8. Damien was gone most of the day. Meetings, phone calls, things he didn't explain and she didn't ask about. When he was there, he was polite, distant. He asked if she needed anything. She always said no. At night, she lay awake in her perfect room and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the ocean and wondering if this was what the rest of her life would feel like. Hollow, controlled, a series of beautiful rooms she'd never chosen. On the 8th day, she went looking for him. She found him in his study, a room on the ground floor with walls lined with books and a desk covered in papers. He was on the phone, speaking rapid Italian. When he saw her in the doorway, he held up one finger, wait, and finished the call. Problem? He asked when he hung up. I want to talk. About? The contract. Damien leaned back in his chair. What about it? The timeline. The terms. Lena stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. If we're going to do this, I want to understand exactly what's expected. I already explained. No, she interrupted. You told me the consequences. I want to know the specifics. Something flickered in his eyes. Interest, maybe. Go on. When does the clock start? The 1-year deadline. It started the day we signed. So we have 11 months left. Roughly. Lena crossed her arms. And during that time, what exactly is required of me? To conceive and carry a child. That's it? That's everything. And after, if we meet the terms, you become a permanent fixture of this family, with all the protections and expectations that entails. Protections, Lena repeated. Like what? Security. Resources. A name that means something. Damien's gaze didn't waver. And in return, you uphold the family's reputation. You don't embarrass us. You don't betray us. You play your part like a good little wife, like a smart woman who understands how power works. Lena stepped closer to the desk. And what about you? What about me? What are your obligations in all this? Damien smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. To provide, to protect, to ensure the family's interests are maintained. That's vague. It's intentional. They stared at each other across the desk. Lena could feel her pulse in her throat. This was a test. She wasn't sure who was testing whom, but it was a test. I'm not going to be passive in this, she said quietly. I didn't think you would be. And I'm not going to pretend this is something it's not. Good, Damien said. Neither am I. Lena nodded slowly. Then we understand each other. We're starting to. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. Yes? If I'm going to be stuck here for a year, I want access to the library and the gardens. I'm not going to sit in that room and rot. Damien's expression softened, barely, but enough to notice. You have access to the entire estate. You're not a prisoner, Lena. Could have fooled me. You're my wife, not my captive. He picked up his phone again, already moving on. Do whatever you want. Just don't leave the property without telling me first. Lena left. But as she walked down the hall, something shifted inside her. Small, fragile, but real. She wasn't going to survive this by waiting to be saved. She was going to have to save herself. The days began to blur together, but Lena refused to let them swallow her whole. She explored the estate. The library became her refuge, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books in Italian, English, French. She read everything she could get her hands on: philosophy, history, novels about women who'd survived worse than arranged marriages. The gardens were sprawling, maze-like. She walked them every morning, learning the pathways, finding quiet corners where the staff wouldn't bother her. There was a fountain near the east wall, half hidden by wisteria. She started bringing books there, sitting on the stone edge and reading until the sun got too hot. Damien noticed. She could tell because he started appearing in places he hadn't before. In the library, ostensibly looking for a file. In the garden, taking a call on the same path she walked every day. He never spoke to her during these encounters, just nodded, acknowledged her presence, moved on. But he was watching, and Lena started watching back. She noticed things, small things. The way he took his coffee, black, no sugar. The way he rubbed the bridge of his nose when he was frustrated. The scar on his left hand, thin and pale, that he never explained. The fact that he didn't sleep much. She could see the light under his door late at night, hear him pacing. He wasn't as controlled as he pretended to be. That realization felt like a weapon. 2 weeks in, Maria knocked on Lena's door with a message. Mr. Falco would like you to join him for dinner tonight, in the garden. Lena looked up from her book. The garden? Yes, ma'am. He's having a table set up near the fountain. Did he say why? Maria smiled. He didn't, but he seemed thoughtful. Lena wasn't sure what to make of that. What time? 8, as usual. When 8 o'clock came, Lena changed into a simple dress, nothing fancy, but not the jeans and t-shirt she'd been living in, and made her way to the fountain. The table was small, intimate. Candles flickered in glass holders. 2 chairs, 2 place settings, and Damien standing beside the fountain with his hands in his pockets, watching the water. He turned when he heard her footsteps. You came, he said. You summoned. I invited. He pulled out her chair. There's a difference. Lena sat. Damien sat across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Maria appeared with wine, poured 2 glasses, and disappeared again. Damien raised his glass. To 2 weeks of not killing each other. Lena almost smiled. Almost. That's a low bar. It's realistic. She took a sip. The wine was good. Of course it was. Why are we out here? She asked. Because I'm tired of that dining room, Damien said. And I thought you might be too. That's considerate. Don't sound so shocked. You haven't exactly been warm. Warmth wasn't part of the contract. Lena set down her glass. Is everything a contract to you? Damien considered that. Yes. Everything worth doing, anyway. That's bleak. That's survival. They ate in silence for a while. The food was lighter than usual: grilled fish, roasted vegetables, bread that was still warm. The air smelled like jasmine and the sea. It was almost peaceful. Almost. I've been thinking, Damien said eventually. About? The timeline, the terms, how we're going to approach this. Lena's stomach tightened. And? We need to be practical, Damien said. Waiting until the last minute would be stupid. Too much risk. Too many variables. So what are you suggesting? He met her eyes. That we start trying within the next month. The word trying hung in the air between them, heavy and loaded. Lena's throat went dry. That's fast. That's strategic. It's clinical. It's necessary. She looked away, focusing on the fountain. The water caught the candlelight, turning it into something almost magical. She hated that something so cold could look so beautiful. I need time, she said quietly. How much? I don't know, more than a month. Damien was silent for a long moment. Then he said, 6 weeks. Lena looked at him. What? 6 weeks? That gives you time to adjust, to prepare, to stop looking at me like I'm the enemy. You are the enemy. No, Damien said. I'm your husband. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. He leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Lena, I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to hurt you. But we both signed this contract and we both have obligations. I'm trying to meet you halfway. Halfway, Lena repeated. You call this halfway? What would you call it? She didn't have an answer for that. Damien sat back. 6 weeks. Think about it. Then he stood, dropped his napkin on the table, and walked back toward the house. Lena sat alone by the fountain, staring at the candles as they burned down to nothing. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. 6 weeks. Strategic. Necessary. She hated how reasonable he made it sound, but more than that, she hated that part of her understood. Because he was right. Waiting until the last minute was reckless. And Lena had been reckless once before, trusted her father, believed he'd protect her, and look where that had gotten her. She couldn't afford to be reckless anymore. But she also couldn't afford to be passive. If this was happening, if she was going to go through with this, she needed control. Not over the outcome, maybe, but over how she got there. Lena sat up in bed, her mind racing. Damien wanted practicality, strategy. Fine, she'd give him strategy, but on her terms. The next morning, Lena found Damien in the study again. He looked up when she entered, his expression guarded. Lena, I thought about your offer, she said. And? 6 weeks is fine. Something shifted in his face. Relief, maybe. Or surprise. Good. But I have conditions. Damien leaned back in his chair. I'm listening. I want to know you, Lena said. Not as a contract, not as a transaction. If we're going to do this, I need to know who you are. Why? Because I refuse to have a child with a stranger. Damien studied her for a long moment. Then he said, What do you want to know? Everything. That's vague. Then start small. Lena crossed her arms. Why did you agree to this marriage? Damien's jaw tightened. Because my family needed it. That's not an answer. That's an excuse. It's the truth. It's part of the truth. Lena stepped closer. You could have said no. You have power, resources. You didn't need me specifically. So why did you say yes? Damien stood, and for the first time, Lena saw something crack in his carefully controlled exterior. Anger, frustration, something raw. Because I don't get to say no, he said quietly. None of us do. Not in this family. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to marry a woman I don't know, tie myself to a contract I didn't write, spend a year trying to produce an heir like it's a business quota? Lena didn't move. Then why? Because if I didn't, someone else would have. Damien's voice was low, sharp. And they wouldn't have been as kind as me. The words hung between them. Lena's pulse was racing. Kind? You're still breathing, aren't you? Damien said. You're still whole, you're still you. That's more than some men in my position would have allowed. That's not kindness, Lena said. That's basic decency. In my world, they're the same thing. They stared at each other. And for the first time, Lena saw him. Not the cold, controlled businessman, not the mafia prince. Just a man who was as trapped as she was. It didn't make her forgive him, but it made her understand him. 6 weeks, she said quietly. Damien nodded. 6 weeks. Lena turned to leave, but before she reached the door, she looked back. One more thing, she said. Yes? If we're going to do this, I'm not going to pretend to be in love with you, and I'm not going to let you pretend with me. No lies, no games, just honesty. Damien's expression softened, just barely. Agreed. Lena left the study, and as she walked down the hall, she realized something. She'd just taken her first real step, not toward him, toward herself. The 6 weeks stretched out like a sentence Lena couldn't appeal. She marked the days in her head, not on a calendar. That felt too deliberate, too much like counting down to an execution. Instead, she let them pile up in small observations. The way the light changed as summer deepened. The way the jasmine in the garden grew wilder, heavier with scent. The way Damien's coffee cup was always in the same spot on the breakfast table, drained to the last drop. He kept his distance. Mostly. But there were moments, brief, barely noticeable, where the careful walls he'd built seemed to thin. A glance that lasted half a second too long. A question about what she was reading that didn't feel like polite obligation. Once, when she twisted her ankle on the uneven garden path, he'd appeared out of nowhere, his hand steadying her elbow before she even realized she was falling. Careful, he'd said. I'm fine. He'd let go immediately, but his hand had been warm, solid. And for just a moment, Lena had let herself lean into it. Then the moment passed, and they went back to being strangers who shared a last name. But Lena wasn't a stranger anymore. Not entirely. She'd started learning him the way you learn a locked door, testing, probing, looking for weaknesses. Not to hurt him, but to understand him. Because if she was going to survive this, she needed to know exactly who she was up against. Damien woke at 5 every morning. She could hear him moving through the house, his footsteps deliberate and quiet. He ran. She'd seen him once, early, before the sun had fully risen. He'd moved like someone trying to outrun something that couldn't be outrun. He took his calls in Italian, rapid and clipped, his voice dropping into a register she'd never heard him use with her. Colder, sharper. There was a cruelty in it that made her stomach tighten, a reminder that the man who poured her wine at dinner was the same man who could destroy someone with a phone call. He didn't talk about his work. Not directly, but she pieced it together from fragments, shipping routes, border disputes, names spoken in hushed tones that made Maria cross herself when she overheard them. And he was tired. Lena could see it in the way his shoulders sagged when he thought no one was looking, the way he rubbed his temples during dinner like he was trying to push back a headache that never quite left. She didn't feel sorry for him, but she saw him, and that was dangerous. 3 weeks in, Lena found herself in the library again. It had become her routine, breakfast alone, a walk through the gardens, then hours in the library until lunch. Damien rarely came in during the day, so she'd claimed it as hers, except today he was already there. He sat in one of the leather chairs by the window, a file open on his lap, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Lena hadn't even known he wore glasses. They made him look softer somehow, more human. He glanced up when she entered. I'm not in your way, am I? It's your house, Lena said. It's our house. She didn't argue. Just crossed to the shelf she'd been working through, Russian literature, dense and tragic and oddly comforting, and pulled down a copy of Anna Karenina. Damien watched her. Heavy reading. I like heavy reading. Why? Lena turned, the book in her hands. Because it reminds me that other people have survived worse. Something flickered across his face. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. Fair enough, he said, and went back to his file. They sat in silence for a while. Lena tried to read, but she kept getting distracted by the sound of him turning pages, the scratch of his pen as he made notes in the margins. It should have been irritating. Instead, it felt almost companionable. She hated that. Can I ask you something? Lena said, not looking up from her book. You just did. Can I ask you something else? Damien set down his pen. Go ahead. Do you ever regret it? This life? He didn't answer right away. When she finally looked at him, his expression was unreadable. Every day, he said quietly. Lena hadn't expected that. Then why do you stay? Because leaving would be worse. He took off his glasses, folding them carefully. I was born into this, Lena. I didn't choose it, but I accepted it. Because the alternative was watching my family tear itself apart, or worse, letting someone else take control. Someone who wouldn't hesitate to burn it all down. So you sacrificed yourself. I did what was necessary. That's not the same thing. Damien stood, crossing to the window. He looked out at the gardens, his hands in his pockets. When I was 16, my father brought me to a meeting. A negotiation, he called it. The other side didn't want to negotiate. They wanted blood. My father made me watch while he had 3 of them executed, right there, in front of everyone. Lena's breath caught. Afterward, Damien continued, his voice flat. He told me that mercy was a luxury we couldn't afford, that the moment you show weakness, someone will use it to destroy you. He turned to look at her. I've spent my entire life proving I'm not weak, that I can be what this family needs me to be, even when it costs me. What does it cost you? Lena asked softly. Damien's smile was bitter. Everything that matters. They stood there across the room from each other, and for the first time Lena felt the weight of what he carried. Not just power, not just wealth, but the crushing, suffocating burden of being the person everyone depended on. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. Damien picked up his file. I made my choices. Now I live with them. He left the library without another word. Lena stayed, staring at the empty chair where he'd been sitting, and realized something that terrified her. She was starting to care. The realization didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, like water finding cracks in a foundation. She noticed when he didn't come down for breakfast one morning, and instead of feeling relieved, she felt worried. She caught herself listening for his footsteps in the hallway, the low murmur of his voice on phone calls. When he came back late one night, his shirt wrinkled and his tie loosened, she almost asked if he was okay. She didn't, but the impulse was there, and that was the problem. Because caring meant vulnerability. It meant giving him power over her that went beyond the contract, beyond the legal bindings. It meant letting him in. Lena couldn't afford that, so she doubled down. She started testing him in small ways, pushing boundaries, seeing how far she could go before he pushed back. She skipped dinner one night without warning. Damien didn't say anything, but the next morning Maria brought breakfast to her room with a note in his handwriting. If you're going to avoid me, at least eat. She borrowed a book from his study without asking. He noticed, of course he did, but when she came down to breakfast the next day, there was a stack of 3 more books beside her plate. All Russian, all tragic. She asked him, point blank over wine one evening, why he hadn't married before. No one worth the risk, he'd said. And I am? You're the obligation. There's a difference. It should have stung. Instead, Lena laughed. Actually laughed. Because it was so brutally honest that she couldn't help but respect it. Damien had stared at her like she'd grown a second head. What? She'd said. I've never heard you laugh before. You've never said anything funny before. His mouth had twitched, almost a smile. Fair point. That night, lying in bed, Lena replayed the conversation and hated herself a little for how much she'd enjoyed it. 4 weeks in, the dreams started. Not nightmares, worse. Dreams where Damien wasn't cold, where his hands were gentle instead of clinical, where he looked at her the way men in movies looked at women they actually wanted, not women they'd been contractually obligated to impregnate. She woke from them feeling hollowed out and angry, because they weren't real. They were her mind playing tricks on her, filling in gaps with fantasies that had no place in her reality. Damien didn't want her. He wanted an heir, a solution to a problem, and she needed to remember that. But her body didn't care about logic. It noticed the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he reached for something on a high shelf. The faint scent of his cologne, cedar, and something sharper, that lingered in the hallway after he passed. The way his voice dropped an octave when he was on the phone late at night, rough with exhaustion. She hated her body for noticing, and she hated herself for not hating it enough. One evening, 5 weeks in, Damien knocked on her door. Lena opened it, surprised. He'd never come to her room before. Can I come in? He asked. She stepped aside. He walked to the balcony doors, looking out at the darkening sky. He was still in his work clothes, dress pants, white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked tired. "We need to talk," he said. Lena's stomach dropped. "About?" "The timeline." Right, the timeline. The thing she'd been successfully not thinking about for the past few days. "What about it?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Damien turned to face her. "We're running out of time. 1 week left." "I know. Are you ready?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Was she ready to let him touch her? To give up the last piece of herself she had control over? To cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed? No, but she didn't have a choice. "I'll be ready," Lena said. Damien studied her face. "That's not what I asked." "It's the only answer that matters." He crossed the room, stopping a few feet away from her, close enough that she could see the faint scar on his jawline, the darker flecks in his gray eyes, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "I don't want to force this," he said quietly. "You're not forcing me. The contract is." "That's semantics. That's reality." Damien's jaw tightened. "Lena." "Don't," she interrupted. "Don't try to make this something it's not. We both know what this is. A transaction. An obligation. You said it yourself. No illusions. I also said I wouldn't hurt you. Then don't make this harder than it needs to be." Lena stepped back, putting distance between them. 1 week. I'll be ready. That's all you need to know." For a moment, Damien looked like he wanted to argue. Then something in his expression shifted, closed off, locked down. The walls went back up. "Fine," he said. 1 week. He left. Lena stood alone in her room, her heart pounding, and wondered why doing the right thing felt so much like losing. The final week was the longest of Lena's life. Every conversation felt weighted. Every glance felt loaded. She caught herself watching him more than she should, cataloging details she had no business noticing. The way he drank his coffee in 3 long sips, like he was medicating. The way he listened when she talked, his full attention focused on her in a way that made her feel seen and exposed all at once. He was careful with her, too careful, like she was something fragile that might shatter if he moved too quickly. Lena hated it, because she wasn't fragile. She was angry and trapped and doing her best to survive, but she wasn't breakable, and treating her like she was only made everything worse. 2 days before the deadline, she found him in the study again. "We need to stop dancing around this," Lena said without preamble. Damien looked up from his laptop. "Excuse me?" "You've been avoiding me for 3 days." "I've been working." "You've been hiding." Lena crossed her arms. "If we're going to do this, we need to actually do it. Not tiptoe around each other like we're afraid of breaking something." Damien closed his laptop slowly. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we have dinner together tonight. Not at opposite ends of a table. Actually together. And we talk. Like 2 people who are about to—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "Sleep together?" Damien finished. "Yes." He stood rounding the desk. "You want to have a conversation about it?" "I want to stop pretending it's not happening." Damien studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Tonight, 7 o'clock, the terrace." "Fine." "And Lena?" "What?" "No running away this time." She met his eyes. "I'm not the one who runs." His smile was faint, almost sad. "Yes, you are. You just do it standing still." The words hit harder than they should have, because he was right. Lena had been running since the day she arrived. Not physically, but emotionally, keeping him at arm's length, refusing to let herself feel anything that might make this real. Because if it became real, it would hurt, and she'd already been hurt enough. At 7 o'clock, Lena walked out onto the terrace. Damien was already there, standing by the railing with a glass of wine in his hand. The sun was setting behind him, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple. He changed into dark jeans and a simple black shirt, the sleeves rolled up, casual, almost normal. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You came," he said. "You sound surprised." "I wasn't sure you would." Lena walked to the small table he'd set up. 2 chairs, 2 glasses, a bottle of wine already open. No candles this time, just the fading daylight. She sat, Damien poured her wine and sat across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Damien said, "I don't know how to do this." Lena looked at him. "Do what?" "This. Be a husband. Be gentle." He set down his glass. "I've spent my entire life learning how to be hard, how to make decisions that hurt people and not flinch, how to compartmentalize. But with you," he stopped, his jaw working, "I don't know how to be what you need." Lena's throat tightened. "What do you think I need?" "Someone who isn't me." The honesty of it nearly broke her. "You're wrong," she said quietly. Damien looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. "I don't need someone soft," Lena continued. "I don't need someone who's going to pretend this is a fairy tale. I need someone who's going to be honest with me, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She leaned forward. "You've been more honest with me than anyone in my entire life, including my own father. So don't tell me you're not what I need." Damien stared at her. "Lena, I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm terrified, actually, of all of this, of losing myself in this, of becoming someone I don't recognize. But I'm not scared of you." "You should be." "Why? Because you're dangerous?" Lena shook her head. "Everyone's dangerous. My father sold me to pay off a debt. Your mother looked at me like I was livestock. The priest married us without even asking if I wanted this. You're not special just because you're honest about what you are." Damien let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "You really don't pull your punches, do you?" "Not anymore." He picked up his wine glass, turning it slowly in his hands. "What changed?" "What do you mean? 3 weeks ago you could barely look at me. Now you're sitting here telling me you're not afraid. What changed?" Lena considered lying. It would be easier, safer. But she'd promised him honesty. "I started seeing you," she said. "Not the contract, not the obligation. You. And I realized that you're just as trapped as I am. Maybe more. Because at least I know what I lost. You've never had anything to lose in the first place." Damien's expression went very still. "I'm not saying I forgive you," Lena continued, "or that I'm okay with any of this. But I understand now. Why you did it. Why you are the way you are. And understanding doesn't fix anything, but it makes it bearable." Damien set down his glass and stood. For a moment, Lena thought he was leaving. Instead, he walked to the railing, his back to her. "My father used to say that feelings were a liability," he said quietly. "That the moment you care about something, you give your enemies a target. So I learned not to care. About anything. Anyone." He turned to look at her. "And then you showed up, and I can't—" He stopped, his hands gripping the railing. "I can't stop caring. And I don't know what to do with that." Lena's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She stood slowly, crossing to where he stood. She stopped a foot away, close enough to touch him if she wanted to. "What do you care about?" she asked. Damien looked at her, and for the first time his expression was completely unguarded. "You," he said. "I care about you, and it's the most terrifying thing I've ever felt." Lena's breath caught. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't part of the plan. But standing there, looking at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he was trying so hard not to reach for her, she realized something. She cared too. Not because she wanted to, not because it was smart or safe or remotely logical, but because he'd let her see him. The real him. Not the mafia prince or the cold businessman, but the man underneath who was just as lost and scared as she was. "Damien," she said softly. "Don't," he said. "Don't say anything kind. I don't deserve it." "I wasn't going to." That surprised a laugh out of him. Rough and unexpected. Lena stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell the cedar of his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "I'm not going to pretend this is love," she said, "because it's not. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it's something, and I think that's enough." Damien's hand came up slowly, hesitantly, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were warm against her cheek. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "If it's not love." Lena considered the question. "Possibility." His thumb traced her jawline, gentle and uncertain. "Possibility." "Yes." They stood there, inches apart, the space between them charged with everything they weren't saying. Then Damien leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't like the movies. It wasn't dramatic or sweeping or perfectly choreographed. It was hesitant, questioning, his lips barely brushing hers, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Lena didn't pull away. She kissed him back, slowly at first, testing, learning the shape of him, the taste of wine on his lips, the way his breath hitched when her hand came up to rest against his chest. Then something shifted. Damien's hand slid into her hair, tilting her head back. The kiss deepened, grew hungrier. Lena's fingers curled into his shirt, pulling him closer, and he responded by wrapping his other arm around her waist, hauling her against him. It wasn't gentle anymore. It was desperate, raw, like they were both trying to prove something, to each other, to themselves. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he said. Not a command, a request. Lena's heart was racing. Damien, not for the contract, not for the air, just stay. She should say no, should walk away, should protect herself while she still could, but she'd spent the last 5 weeks protecting herself, and it hadn't made her any safer. "Okay," she whispered. Damien pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching hers. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He smiled. A real smile. Not the careful half smiles he usually gave her. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. Get used to it." He kissed her again, slower this time, and took her hand. They walked back into the house together, through the quiet hallways, past the closed doors and darkened rooms. When they reached his door, Damien paused. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. Lena squeezed his hand. "Open the door." He did. The room was darker than hers, more masculine. Heavy furniture, dark wood, a bed that looked like it had never been slept in by more than one person. Damien closed the door behind them and turned to face her. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other. Then Lena stepped forward and kissed him. What happened next wasn't perfect. It was fumbling and uncertain and vulnerable in ways that left them both exposed. There were moments of hesitation, whispered questions, hands that shook, but it was real. And when Lena finally fell asleep in Damien's arms, the sun just starting to creep over the horizon, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Safe. She woke alone. The bed beside her was empty, the sheets cool. Lena sat up, disoriented, and looked around the unfamiliar room. Damien's room. Right. She found her dress draped over a chair, her shoes placed neatly beside it. Considerate. That was new? She dressed quickly, her mind racing. What happened now? Did they talk about it? Pretend it didn't happen? Act like everything had changed or like nothing had? She didn't know the rules for this. When she opened the door, Maria was in the hallway with fresh linens. "Good morning, Mrs. Falco," Maria said warmly. "Mr. Falco asked me to let you know he's in the study when you're ready." "Thank you." Lena found him exactly where Maria said he'd be, sitting at his desk with a coffee in hand and his laptop open. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment his expression was unreadable. Then he stood. "How are you?" he asked. "Fine." Lena closed the door behind her. "You left. I had a call at 6. I didn't want to wake you." "Oh." They stood there, awkward and uncertain, and Lena hated it. "Are we going to talk about last night?" she asked. Damien's jaw tightened. "Do you want to?" "I don't know. Do you?" "Lena, don't do that," she interrupted. "Don't go back to being careful with me. Not after—" She stopped, her throat tight. Damien crossed to her, his expression serious. "Last night wasn't about the contract." "I know. I need you to understand that. What happened between us, it wasn't obligation. It wasn't strategy. It was real," Lena finished. "Yes." She looked up at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and felt something crack open in her chest. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. Damien's hand came up to cup her face. "I don't know. But I want to find out." Lena leaned into his touch, just for a moment, letting herself have this. Then she stepped back. "I need time," she said, "to figure out what this is, what we are. Take all the time you need, even if it's messy." "Especially if it's messy," Lena nodded. Okay. She turned to leave, but Damien caught her hand. Lena? Yes? Thank you for staying. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. Thank you for asking. As she walked back to her room, Lena realized something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. The game had changed, and she had no idea who was winning anymore. The days that followed didn't get easier, they got complicated. Lena had expected clarity after that night, some kind of shift that would make everything make sense. Instead, she got confusion wrapped in layers of want and fear, and something she refused to name. Damien was different. Not dramatically. He didn't suddenly become warm or affectionate or anything close to what normal husbands probably were. But there were changes. Small ones. The kind you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. He started joining her for breakfast. Not every morning, but enough that she began setting out 2 cups instead of 1. He'd sit across from her with his laptop and his coffee, working in silence while she read, and somehow the quiet felt less lonely than it had before. He asked about her day. Actually asked, not just the polite "how are you" that people said without listening to the answer. He wanted to know what she was reading, what she thought about it, if she'd found the section of the garden with the lemon trees yet. And he touched her, casually, a hand at the small of her back when they passed in the hallway, fingers brushing hers when he handed her a wine glass at dinner. Nothing demanding, nothing that required a response. Just small points of contact that reminded her he was there. Lena didn't know what to do with any of it, because this wasn't part of the plan. The plan had been simple. Survive the year, fulfill the contract, keep her heart locked up where it couldn't be used against her. But Damien was making that impossible, and the worst part was she didn't think he was doing it on purpose. He was just being himself, and herself was turning out to be far more dangerous than the cold, calculating businessmen she'd married. A week after that night, Lena found herself in the garden again. It was late afternoon, the heat of the day finally breaking into something bearable. She'd brought a book but hadn't opened it. Instead, she sat by the fountain, watching the water and trying to untangle the mess in her head. You're thinking too hard. Lena looked up. Damien stood a few feet away, his jacket slung over his shoulder, his tie loosened. He looked tired, but not in the bone-deep way he usually did. Just normal tired. End of the day tired. How do you know I'm thinking? Lena asked. You get this line right here. He tapped the space between his eyebrows. Means you're either thinking or about to throw something at me. Maybe both. He smiled, actually smiled. Mind if I sit? Lena gestured to the space beside her on the fountain's edge. Damien sat, leaving a careful few inches between them. He stared at the water for a moment, then said, We need to talk. Lena's stomach tightened. That's never good. It's not bad, just necessary. He turned to face her. What happened between us? Damien, we don't have to dissect it. Yes, we do. His voice was firm, but not unkind. Because I don't want you thinking it was just about the contract, or that I'm using you. I don't think that. You do. I can see it. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Every time I touch you, you tense up, like you're waiting for me to take something from you. Lena looked away. That's not true. Lena. Fine. Maybe it's a little true. She pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. But can you blame me? A month ago, you made it very clear this was business. Now you're acting like... She stopped. Like what? Like you care. I do care. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. Why now? What changed? Damien was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You changed it. That night on the terrace, when you told me you weren't afraid of me. When you saw through all my bullshit and called me on it. That's when I realized I couldn't keep pretending this was just a contract. Because it stopped being one the moment you fought back. Lena's throat felt tight. I didn't fight back. I just stopped running. Same thing. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. I know this is confusing. I know I'm confusing, but I'm trying, Lena. I'm trying to figure out how to do this without screwing it up. Do what? Be your husband, not because a piece of paper says I have to, because I want to. The words hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Lena looked down at their joined hands. His was larger, scarred across the knuckles, calloused in places hers weren't. But it was warm, solid, real. I don't know how to trust this, she admitted quietly. Then don't. Not yet. Damien squeezed her hand gently. Just give me a chance to earn it. Lena met his eyes. The pale gray that had seemed so cold that first day now looked almost soft in the fading light. Vulnerable, even. Okay, she said, but I need you to be honest with me. About everything. No more secrets. No more secrets, Damien agreed. Starting now. He raised an eyebrow. What do you want to know? Why you really agreed to this marriage, not the family obligation answer, the real reason. Damien exhaled slowly. Because I was tired. Of what? Being alone. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I've spent my entire life surrounded by people, and I've never felt more isolated. My father taught me that relationships were leverage. My mother taught me that love was weakness, and I believed them. Until I realized that the only thing worse than being vulnerable is being completely empty. Lena's chest ached. So you thought a contract marriage would fix that? No, I thought it would be another obligation I could manage, another role I could play. He looked at her. I didn't expect you to be real. I'm always real. Exactly. That's the problem. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You don't perform. You don't calculate every word before you say it. You just exist, and you expect me to do the same. And I don't know how to do that. Then learn, Lena said. With me. Damien's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. Hope, possibly. He lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Quick, gentle. Deal, he said. They sat there as the sun set, hands linked, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Lena felt like maybe she wasn't drowning anymore. Maybe she was learning to swim. But learning to swim didn't mean the water was safe. 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. It started with a phone call. Lena was in the library, curled up in her usual chair with a cup of tea and a novel she wasn't really reading. Damien had been in meetings all morning. She could hear his voice occasionally drifting down the hallway, speaking in rapid Italian that she still couldn't quite follow. Then the house went quiet. Too quiet. Lena set down her book and listened. No phone calls, no footsteps. Just an eerie, heavy silence that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She found Damien in his study, standing at the window with his back to the door. His phone was on the desk, screen dark. His hands were in his pockets, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Damien? He didn't turn around. You should go back to the library. What happened? Nothing that concerns you. Lena stepped into the room. If it concerns you, it concerns me. That was the deal, remember? No secrets. This is different. How? Because it's dangerous. He finally turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her stomach drop. Cold, distant. The walls were back up, higher than ever. And I need you to trust me when I say you're better off not knowing. Don't do that, Lena said. Don't shut me out. I'm protecting you. I don't need protection. I need honesty. Damien's jaw tightened. Fine. You want honesty? My cousin called. There's a problem with one of our shipments, the kind of problem that gets people killed if it's not handled correctly. I have to go to Milan tomorrow to fix it. You're staying here. For how long? I don't know. A few days? Maybe a week? Lena crossed her arms. And you were just going to leave without telling me? I was going to tell you tonight, after you'd already made all the decisions. Yes. He said it without apology. Because this is my world, Lena, not yours. And I'm not dragging you into it. I'm already in it. I became part of it the day we got married. The contract made you my wife. It didn't make you a criminal. The word hung in the air between them, sharp and ugly. Lena felt something cold settle in her chest. Is that what you are? A criminal? Damien's expression didn't change. You knew what my family was when you signed the papers. I knew you had money. I knew you had power. I didn't know the details. And you don't need to. He moved toward the door. I'm leaving at 6 tomorrow morning. Maria will make sure you have everything you need while I'm gone. Damien, this conversation is over. He walked out. Lena stood in the empty study, shaking with a mix of anger and fear and something that felt dangerously close to hurt. Because he was right. She had known, on some level, what she was marrying into. Her father's debts hadn't been to a bank. They'd been to people who operated outside the law, who solved problems with violence and intimidation. But knowing it in the abstract was different from seeing it in Damien's eyes. The coldness, the calculation, the reminder that the man who held her hand in the garden was the same man who could order someone's death with a phone call. She'd been an idiot to think otherwise. That night, Damien didn't come to dinner. Lena ate alone, pushing food around her plate while Maria hovered nearby, clearly uncomfortable with the tension radiating through the house. "Is Mr. Falco unwell?" Maria asked gently. "He's fine. Just busy." Maria nodded, not believing her for a second, and cleared the plates. Lena went to bed early, or tried to. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening for sounds from down the hall. Around midnight, she heard Damien's door open and close, footsteps in the hallway, then silence. She almost got up, almost went to him. But what would she say? Don't go? Don't be who you are? Don't remind me that this was never real? So she stayed in bed and tried to sleep. She woke to the sound of a car engine. Lena stumbled to the window in time to see the black sedan pulling away from the house, Damien in the back seat. He didn't look up, didn't hesitate, just left. And Lena stood there, watching him disappear, and hated herself for caring. The first day without him was fine. Lena kept busy. She read. She walked the gardens. She pretended everything was normal. The second day was harder. The house felt too big, too empty. Every room reminded her of him. The study where he worked. The dining room where they'd started having actual conversations. The terrace where he'd kissed her for the first time. By the third day, she was furious. Not at him for leaving, at herself for missing him. Because this was exactly what she'd been afraid of. Getting attached, letting him in, building something fragile, and then watching it shatter the moment reality intruded. She'd been so careful, so strategic. She'd planned everything. How to make him notice her, how to make him want her, how to ensure she had some kind of power in this arrangement. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd forgotten that the plan was supposed to protect her heart. On the fourth day, Damien called. Lena almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out over pride. "Hello? It's me." His voice sounded rough, tired. "How are you?" "Fine." "Lena, is there a reason you called?" She kept her voice cool, detached. "Or did you just want to check that I'm still here?" There was a pause. Then Damien said, "I called to apologize." That surprised her. "For what?" "For leaving the way I did. For shutting you out." He exhaled. "You were right. We made a deal, no secrets, and I broke it." "Yes, you did. I was trying to protect you." "I know, but I don't need protection from the truth. I need you to trust me with it." Another pause. Longer this time. "The shipment," Damien said finally, contained weapons, high-grade military equipment that was supposed to go to a buyer in Eastern Europe, except the buyer backed out at the last minute, and now we have a warehouse full of illegal arms that customs is already sniffing around. Lena's breath caught. "What are you going to do? Find another buyer? Or move it somewhere safer? Or destroy it? I'm still figuring it out." "Is it dangerous?" "Everything I do is dangerous." "You know what I mean." "Yes," Damien admitted. "It's dangerous. If this goes wrong, people will die, possibly including me." Fear shot through her, cold and sharp. "Then don't do it." "It's not that simple." "Why not? Just walk away? Let someone else handle it." "If I walk away, my family loses credibility. Our partners lose faith. And the next time we need something, no one will answer the phone." His voice dropped. "This is the cost of the life I chose, Lena. I don't get to walk away just because it's hard." Lena pressed her free hand against her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. "When are you coming back?" 2 more days, maybe 3. That's not an answer. "It's the only one I have." She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was an idiot for risking his life over a shipment of guns, to beg him to come home. Instead, she said, "Be careful." "I will." "Damien." "Yes?" "Don't die. We still have 9 months left on the contract. It would be really inconvenient." She heard him laugh, soft and surprised. "I'll do my best." They hung up. Lena sat on the edge of her bed, phone still in her hand, and tried to breathe through the panic clawing at her throat. Because somewhere in the last few weeks, Without meaning to, without planning it, she'd fallen into the exact trap she'd sworn to avoid. She cared about him, not as a means to an end, not as a strategy, she just cared. And it was going to destroy her. Damien came back on the 6th day. Lena heard the car pull up around noon. She was in the garden, pretending to read. Actually just watching the driveway like a woman waiting for news from a war. He looked worse than she'd expected. Exhausted, unshaven. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie gone. But he was whole. Alive. Relief hit her so hard she almost couldn't breathe. Damien saw her and changed direction, walking straight across the lawn toward her. He didn't say anything, just stopped a few feet away, looking at her like he was trying to figure out if she was real. "You came back," Lena said. "I said I would." "You said maybe." "I was being pessimistic." He sat down on the fountain's edge beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "It's handled. The shipment's been moved. No one died." "Good." "I'm sorry I worried you." Lena looked at him sharply. "What makes you think I was worried?" "Because you're out here instead of in the library. And you've been staring at the driveway for the last 20 minutes. I was not—" She stopped. "Were you watching me?" "From the study window. For the last 10 minutes. He rubbed his face. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because I left. Because I shut you out. Because—" He stopped, his jaw working. "Because I thought maybe you'd realize this was a mistake. That being with me was too dangerous, too complicated, too much." Lena's chest ached. "Do you want it to be a mistake?" "No." The word came out raw, honest. "But I'd understand if you did." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Lena said, "I'm angry at you." "I know. Not for leaving, for making me care." Damien looked at her. "I didn't mean to." "I know, that's why I'm angry." She finally turned to face him. "I had a plan, Damien. Keep my distance, fulfill the contract, protect myself, and you ruined it." "How?" "By being honest. By letting me see you. By making me believe this could be more than just business." Her voice cracked slightly. "And then you left. And I spent 6 days terrified that you weren't coming back. And I hated myself for it, because I wasn't supposed to care this much." Damien's hand found hers. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize. It's not your fault I'm an idiot." "You're not an idiot." He squeezed her hand. "You're brave. Braver than I've ever been." "How do you figure that?" "Because you're willing to feel things. To risk getting hurt. I've spent my whole life avoiding that." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And then you showed up and made me want things I didn't know I was allowed to want." Lena's throat tightened. "Like what?" "Like a real marriage, a real partner. Someone who sees me, all of me, and doesn't run." His eyes met hers. "Like you." The confession hung between them, vulnerable and terrifying. Lena should pull away. Should protect herself while she still could. Should remember that this man was dangerous, that his world was violent, that loving him could cost her everything. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, angry, full of all the fear and frustration and feelings she'd been holding back for 6 days. Damien responded immediately, his hand sliding into her hair, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, turned urgent, and Lena felt something break open inside her, something she'd been keeping locked and carefully guarded. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. "Come inside," he said quietly. "Why?" "Because I missed you, and I want to show you how much." Lena's pulse jumped. "Damien, just say yes." She should say no, should make him work for it, should hold on to her anger a little longer, but she was tired of fighting. "Yes," she whispered. They barely made it to his room. Damien's hands were on her the moment the door closed, pulling her against him, his mouth finding hers with an urgency that stole her breath. Lena responded in kind, her fingers working at the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel skin, to confirm he was real and whole and here. This time was different from the first. There was no hesitation, no careful testing of boundaries, just raw need and the desperate relief of being together again. Afterward, they lay tangled in his sheets, the afternoon sun filtering through the curtains. Damien's fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, and Lena felt her eyes growing heavy. "Stay," Damien murmured. "Sleep here." "I should go back to my room." "Why?" "Because—" She trailed off, not having a good answer. "Stay," he said again. "Please." Lena shifted closer, tucking herself against his side. "Okay." She felt him relax, his arm tightening around her. "Lena?" "I'm falling for you." Her eyes snapped open. "What?" "I'm falling for you," Damien repeated, his voice quiet but certain. "I know I'm not supposed to. I know it complicates everything. But I am, and I needed you to know." Lena's heart was pounding. She should say something, should tell him she felt the same way, but the words stuck in her throat, because saying them out loud would make it real. And making it real meant admitting that she'd already lost this game she'd been so careful to play. "You don't have to say it back," Damien said, sensing her struggle. "I just needed you to know." Lena pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her cheek. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of losing myself in something I never wanted in the first place." Damien's hand stroked her hair. "You won't lose yourself. I won't let you." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll try." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And that I'll be honest with you, even when it's hard." Lena closed her eyes. What if honest isn't enough? Then we figure out what is. Together. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this could work, that they could build something real out of a contract that was never meant to hold anything genuine. But trust required faith, and Lena's faith had been broken too many times. Still, lying there in his arms, feeling safe in a way she hadn't felt in months, she let herself hope. Just a little. The next morning, Lena woke to find Damien already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching her. "That's creepy," she mumbled, her voice rough with sleep. "You talk in your sleep." "I do not." "You do. You were arguing with someone about bread." Lena groaned and pulled a pillow over her face. "I hate you." "No, you don't." He tugged the pillow away, grinning. "You're falling for me, I can tell. Arrogant. Observant." He kissed her forehead. "Come on, get up. I want to show you something." "Now?" "Yes, now." 20 minutes later, they were in his study. Damien unlocked a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small leather journal. "What is that?" Lena asked. "My father's." He handed it to her. "I found it after he died. It's complicated, but I think you should read it." Lena opened the journal carefully. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, all in Italian. She couldn't read most of it, but she recognized names, dates, numbers that looked like transactions. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. "Because I want you to understand," Damien said. "Everything, where I come from, what this family is, what I'm trying to change." "Change? I'm not my father, Lena. I don't want to be. But I'm also not free to just walk away from everything he built." He sat on the edge of the desk. "I'm trying to transition the business into something legitimate, legal. It's slow and it's dangerous and there are people who don't want it to happen, but I'm trying." Lena set down the journal. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you deserve to know what you're really part of. Not the sanitized version. The truth." He met her eyes. "And because if we're going to do this, really do this, I need you to understand what you're signing up for." Lena's chest tightened. "And what am I signing up for?" "A life that's never going to be completely safe. A husband who has enemies. A family that operates in shades of gray." He paused. "But also a partner who will fight for you, protect you, choose you, every single day." The words settled over her, heavy with meaning. "I'm not asking you to decide right now," Damien continued. "I just need you to know what this is, what I am, before we go any further." Lena looked at him, at the vulnerability in his expression, the hope he was trying to hide, the fear that she'd walk away. And she realized something. She'd already decided. Somewhere between these garden conversations and the honest confessions and the way he looked at her like she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world, she'd made her choice. "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly. Damien's expression cracked. Lena, I'm not saying it's easy, or that I'm not still scared, but I'm not leaving. She stepped closer to him. You asked me to give you a chance to earn my trust. Well, you're earning it, so stop waiting for me to run. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. But she didn't pull away. Because for the first time in her life, Lena felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, even if it terrified her. 2 weeks later, they moved back to Milan. Lena had known it was coming. Damien had business to handle, meetings that couldn't be postponed any longer. But leaving the estate felt like leaving a cocoon, uncomfortable, but safe. Milan meant returning to reality, to his family, to the world that had traded her like currency. The Milan house was different, colder. All glass and steel and modern edges, perched in an expensive neighborhood where security cameras watched every corner. It felt like a fortress. Or a prison. Lena hadn't decided which yet. Isabella was waiting when they arrived. She stood in the foyer perfectly composed in a cream suit, her silver hair immaculate. Her eyes swept over Lena with the same assessing look she'd given her at the wedding, and Lena fought the urge to smooth her dress. Mother, Damien said, his voice carefully neutral. Damien. Lena. Isabella's smile was polite, but didn't reach her eyes. I trust Sicily was productive. It was, Damien said. Good. We have much to discuss. She turned toward the sitting room without waiting for a response. Join me. It wasn't a request. Damien's hand found Lena's, squeezing briefly. I'll handle this. We'll handle this, Lena corrected quietly. Something flickered in his expression. Pride, maybe. He nodded. They followed Isabella into a sitting room that was all white furniture and uncomfortable formality. She sat in a high-backed chair like it was a throne. Damien took the sofa, pulling Lena down beside him. His hand stayed on her knee, a small claim of solidarity. I assume the contract terms are being met? Isabella asked, her gaze fixed on Lena. Lena felt heat crawl up her neck. That's personal. It's business. And since the family's future depends on it, I have every right to ask. Mother, Damien started. It's fine, Lena interrupted. She met Isabella's gaze head on. We're handling it. Handling it, Isabella repeated. That's vague. That's intentional. Isabella's eyebrow arched. You've developed a spine. How refreshing. I've always had one. You just never bothered to notice. The room went very quiet. Damien's hand tightened on Lena's knee, but he didn't intervene, just waited. Isabella studied Lena for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. A real smile, sharp and approving. Perhaps you're more suited to this family than I thought, Isabella said. Very well. I won't press. But understand this, Lena. Failure isn't an option for either of you. Too much depends on this alliance. We understand, Damien said. Do you? Isabella turned to her son. Because I've heard rumors about your plans to legitimize the business, about meetings with government officials and lawyers. Damien's expression didn't change. I'm diversifying. It's smart business. It's dangerous business. You're making enemies. I've always had enemies. Not like this. Not people who see you as a threat to the entire structure. Isabella stood, smoothing her skirt. Be careful, Damien. Ambition is admirable. Recklessness gets you killed. She walked out, leaving them alone in the two-white room. Lena exhaled slowly. She's terrifying. She's protective, in her own twisted way. That was protective? You're still breathing, aren't you? Damien turned to her. She likes you. That was her liking me? She didn't threaten to disown you or have you removed, so yes. He stood, pulling her up with him. Come on, I'll show you the rest of the house. The house was massive. Too many rooms, too much space. Lena's bedroom was on the second floor, connected to Damien's through a shared bathroom. An attempt at propriety that felt ridiculous given everything. You can redecorate if you want, Damien said, standing in the doorway of her room. Change whatever you don't like. Lena looked around. The room was beautiful in that sterile, magazine-spread way, perfect and soulless. It's fine. Lena. What? You hate it, I can tell, she sighed. It's just very white. So change it. To what? Whatever you want. This is your home now. Make it feel like one. The word home settled strangely in her chest. She'd never thought of anywhere as home. Not her father's house, where she'd been an afterthought. Not the estate in Sicily, beautiful as it was. Definitely not here. But Damien was looking at her with such earnest hope that she found herself nodding. Okay, I'll think about it. He smiled. Good. I have a meeting at 4, but I'll be back for dinner. 7? Sure. He hesitated, then crossed to her and kissed her forehead. Quick and casual, like it was something they did now. Like they were actually married instead of just legally bound. Lena's heart did something complicated in her chest. See you tonight, Damien said, and left. Lena stood alone in her white room and wondered when exactly she'd stop thinking of him as the enemy. The first few days in Milan fell into a rhythm. Damien left early for meetings and came back late, usually exhausted but always making time for dinner. They'd sit in the dining room, smaller than the one in Sicily, less formal, and talk about nothing important. Books, weather, the fact that Maria had followed them to Milan and seemed determined to overfeed them both. It was almost normal, except for the security. Lena noticed it immediately. The guards posted at every entrance, the cameras, the way Damien's phone buzzed constantly with alerts, the tension in his shoulders that never quite left. Is it always like this? She asked one night over wine. Like what? The security, the paranoia. Damien set down his glass. It's not paranoia if people are actually trying to kill you. Lena's stomach dropped. What? I'm exaggerating, mostly. He ran a hand through his hair. There are people who don't like the direction I'm taking the business, who see legitimacy as weakness. They're making noise. Nothing serious yet. Yet, he agreed. Should I be worried? No, I've handled worse. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I won't let anything happen to you, I promise. Lena wanted to believe him, but promises felt fragile in a world built on violence. What if something happens to you? She asked quietly. Damien's expression softened. It won't. You can't know that. No, but I'm careful, and I have good people protecting me. Damien! Lena! He squeezed her hand. I know this is scary, but this is my life. It's always been my life. And I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to be honest about the risks. The risk is real, Damien said, but manageable. And I'm doing everything I can to minimize it, including keeping you out of it. I don't want to be kept out. I want to know what's happening. Why? So you can worry? So I can prepare. Lena pulled her hand back. I'm not fragile, Damien. Stop treating me like I'll shatter if you tell me the truth. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the sideboard, and poured himself a whiskey. He downed it in one swallow before turning back to her. There's a faction within the family, he said, led by my uncle Vittor. He doesn't agree with my plans to go legitimate. He thinks I'm weak, that I'm destroying everything my father built. And he's making moves, quiet ones, talking to our partners, suggesting that maybe I'm not fit to lead. Lena's chest tightened. Can he remove you? Not easily, but if enough people side with him, he could make my life very difficult. Or very short. That's not funny. I'm not joking. Damien poured another whiskey but didn't drink it, just stared at the glass. I've been trying to shore up support, prove that legitimacy is profitable, but it's slow, and Vittore is impatient. So what are you going to do? What? Keep moving forward, keep making deals, keep showing that my way works. He finally looked at her. And keep you safe, which means keeping you separate from all of this. I don't want to be separate. Too bad. Lena stood, anger flashing through her. Don't dismiss me. I'm not dismissing you. I'm protecting you. I didn't ask for protection. I asked for partnership. Partnership doesn't mean I drag you into a war. Maybe it does, Lena's voice rose. Maybe partnership means we face things together instead of you shutting me out every time things get hard. This isn't hard, Lena. This is dangerous. So teach me, prepare me. Let me be part of this instead of treating me like a child who can't handle the truth. Damien's jaw clenched. You want the truth? Fine. If Vittore decides to move against me, he won't just come for me. He'll come for everyone I care about, including you, and I will not let that happen. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Lena's anger deflated slightly. So what am I supposed to do? Just sit here and wait? You're supposed to trust me, Damien said. Trust that I know what I'm doing, that I can handle this. I do trust you, but I also need to feel like I'm part of your life, not just an accessory you take out for dinner. Damien crossed to her, his expression softening. You're not an accessory. Then stop treating me like one. He cupped her face in his hands. I'm trying to keep you alive, Lena. Can you understand that? The thought of something happening to you because of me, because of my choices, it terrifies me. Lena's throat tightened. And you think it doesn't terrify me? Watching you leave every day, wondering if you'll come back, seeing the tension in your shoulders, the exhaustion in your eyes, knowing you're carrying all of this alone? I'm not alone. I have you. Then act like it, Lena said. Let me in, all the way. Damien's forehead dropped to hers. I don't know how. Then learn, with me. They stood there, breathing the same air, and Lena felt the walls between them thinning again. Not gone, but cracking. Okay, Damien whispered. I'll try. That's all I'm asking. He kissed her then, soft and slow and full of things neither of them knew how to say. And for a moment, the danger outside didn't matter, just them. But the danger didn't stay outside for long. 3 days later, Lena was in the library when she heard shouting. She set down her book and moved to the door, listening. Male voices, angry and overlapping. One was Damien's, the other was unfamiliar. Against her better judgment, Lena crept down the hallway. They were in the study. The door was half open, and through the gap she could see Damien standing behind his desk, his expression carved from stone. Across from him was a man in his 50s, broad-shouldered and red-faced with fury. You're making us weak, the man shouted. I'm making us sustainable, Damien shot back. You're betraying everything our family stands for. Our family stands for survival. And this is how we survive. The man slammed his hand on the desk. Your father is rolling in his grave. My father is dead, and I'm not him. That's the problem. Damien's voice dropped dangerously low. Get out, Vittore. So this was the uncle. Lena pressed closer to the door, her heart racing. I'm not going anywhere, Vittore said. Not until you see reason. I see perfectly clearly. You're the one who's blind. I'm protecting this family. You're protecting your own interests. There's a difference. Vittore's expression twisted into something ugly. You think you're so smart, so evolved, but you're just a boy playing at being a man. And when you fall, and you will fall, I'll be there to pick up the pieces. Is that a threat? It's a promise. They stared at each other, the air crackling with tension. Then Vittore's gaze shifted, landing directly on Lena. She froze. Well, well, Vittore said. The bride. Listening at doors. How unbecoming. Damien's head snapped toward the door. His expression went from cold to furious in an instant. Lena, go to your room. No, Vittore interrupted. Let her stay. She should hear this. Should know what kind of man she married. Vittore, Damien's voice was a warning. Tell her, nephew. Tell her about the deal you made with her father. How you lowballed him. How you knew he was desperate and used it to your advantage. Lena's breath caught. She looked at Damien, who had gone very still. That's not, Damien started. Not what? Not true? Vittore smiled, cruel and satisfied. You negotiated her price like she was cattle, drove it down until her father had no choice but to accept. All business, right? No room for sentiment. Lena felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Damien's eyes met hers, and she saw the confirmation there. The guilt. Is that true? She asked quietly. Lena, is it true? Damien's jaw worked. Yes, but nothing. Vittore's voice dripped with satisfaction. He's no different from any of us. He just hides it better. Lena turned and walked away. Behind her, she heard Damien's voice, sharp and furious, telling Vittore to get out. But she didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept walking until she reached her room and shut the door. Then she sank onto the bed and tried to breathe through the betrayal crushing her chest. She'd known, on some level, that the marriage was a transaction, that money had changed hands, that she'd been sold. But hearing it said out loud, hearing that Damien had negotiated, had bargained her down like she was a used car, It made it real in a way it hadn't been before. And it hurt. A knock at the door made her look up. "Go away," she called. "Lena, please. I said go away." The door opened anyway. Damien stood in the doorway, looking wrecked. "I told you to leave," Lena said, "and I'm not listening." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "We need to talk about this." "What's there to talk about? You bought me? You admit it." "I negotiated a contract with your father, yes, but what? You didn't think of me as a person? You didn't care that you were destroying my life?" "I cared," Damien said, "but I also had responsibilities to my family, to the business, and yes, I negotiated, because that's what I do. That's who I am." Lena stood, anger flaring. "Don't you dare make this about business." "It was business, that's the truth." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about truth? You've spent weeks telling me you're different, that you're not like your father, that you're trying to change, but you're exactly like him. You just dress it up prettier." Damien flinched like she'd slapped him. "That's not fair." "Fair? You negotiated my price and you want to talk to me about fair? I did what I had to do." "You had a choice. You always have a choice." "No," Damien said, his voice rising. "I don't. That's what you don't understand. I was born into this. I didn't choose it, and I've been trying my entire life to make something better out of it. But I can't change the past. I can't undo the contract. All I can do is try to make it right going forward." "By lying to me?" "I never lied." "You withheld the truth. Same thing." "I didn't tell you because I knew it would hurt you, and I was trying to protect you from that." "Stop protecting me," Lena's voice cracked. "I'm so tired of you deciding what I can and can't handle. I'm not a child. I'm your wife, and I deserve to know everything. Even the ugly parts, especially the ugly parts." Damien ran a hand through his hair, frustrated and exhausted. "You're right. You do. And I should have told you. I'm sorry." The apology caught her off guard. Lena had expected him to fight, to defend himself, to turn it around on her somehow. But he just stood there, looking at her with such raw regret that it made her chest ache. "I'm sorry," he said again, "for negotiating with your father like you were property, for not telling you the details, for making you feel like you don't matter. You do matter, more than anything." Lena's anger wavered. "How can I believe that? How can I believe anything you say when you keep things from me? Because I'm telling you now, all of it." Damien stepped closer. "Your father came to me with a debt he couldn't pay. 3 million euros plus interest. He offered you as collateral. I could have said no, but if I had, he would have gone to someone else. Someone worse. Someone who wouldn't have cared if you were comfortable or safe or treated with any kind of respect." Lena's throat tightened. "So I said yes," Damien continued. "And I negotiated because that's what my family expected. But I also made sure the contract had protections for you, that you'd be provided for, that you'd have your own resources, your own money, if you ever wanted to leave." "What?" "It's in the fine print. After the year, if you choose to stay, you get access to a trust. If you choose to leave, you get a settlement. Either way, you're not dependent on me or my family. You have choices." Lena stared at him. "I didn't know that. Because I didn't want you to think I was buying your compliance. But I also didn't want you trapped." He reached for her hand, hesitating until she let him take it. "I know I screwed this up. I know I can't change how we started. But I'm trying, Lena. I'm trying to be better. For you." Lena looked down at their joined hands. His was scarred and calloused, evidence of a life lived hard. Hers was softer, but no less marked. They were both damaged in different ways. "I don't know if I can forgive this," she said quietly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. Not yet. I'm asking for a chance to earn it." "You're always asking for chances." "Because I keep screwing up." His mouth twisted into something bitter. "I wasn't built for this, for caring about someone, for having something to lose. But you make me want to try." Lena's chest ached. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the hurt and use it as armor. But looking at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, the genuine remorse, she felt her defenses cracking. "No more secrets," she said, "no more secrets. And no more deciding what I can handle. I want the truth, all of it, even when it's ugly." "Agreed." Lena pulled her hand back and crossed her arms. And you need to deal with Vittore, because if he comes after you, I need to know I can trust that you'll handle it. I will. When? Soon. I'm building support, making alliances. When I move against him, it has to be decisive. No room for him to fight back. Lena nodded slowly. Okay. Okay. I'm still angry, and I'm still hurt, but I'm not leaving. Damien exhaled, relief washing over his face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to make you work for this. I wouldn't expect anything less. They stood there, the space between them still charged with tension, but also something softer, something like understanding. I need time, Lena said, to process this. Take all the time you need. I mean it, Damien. I need space. I'll sleep in my own room. Give you privacy. Lena felt a pang at that, but didn't argue. She needed to think, to figure out where they went from here. Okay, she said. Damien nodded and turned to leave, but at the door he paused. For what it's worth, he said, you were never just a transaction to me. From the moment I met you, you were more. I just didn't know how to tell you that. Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. Lena stood alone in her white room and wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the smartest decision. The next few days were tense. Lena kept to herself, spending hours in the library or the garden. Damien gave her space like he'd promised, but she could feel him watching, waiting. She wasn't sure what she was waiting for, some sign that she could trust him again, that this wasn't all a carefully constructed lie. On the fourth day, Maria found her in the garden. Mrs. Falco? Lena looked up from her book. Yes? Mr. Falco asked me to give you this. Maria held out a small envelope. Lena took it, confused. Inside was a key and a note in Damien's handwriting. 3rd floor, East Wing. It's yours. Curiosity won out over anger. Lena made her way upstairs, following Maria's directions to a door she'd never noticed before. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a room that took her breath away. It had been completely transformed. The walls were painted a soft sage green. There were bookshelves lining one wall, already filled with her favorite authors. A reading chair by the window with perfect natural light, a small desk, plants in every corner, vibrant and alive. It was everything she would have chosen if someone had asked. And on the desk was another note. You said you wanted a home. I'm trying to give you one. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. D. Lena's eyes burned. She pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed, because this wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't flowers or jewelry or some dramatic declaration. It was listening. It was seeing her. It was proof that he'd been paying attention all along. She stayed in the room for an hour, just sitting in the chair and looking out the window, thinking. Damien had hurt her, had negotiated her like she was property, had withheld the truth. But he'd also protected her in ways she hadn't known, had given her choices when she thought she had none, had tried, in his broken, imperfect way, to make this marriage something real, and he was still trying. That night, Lena knocked on his door. Damien opened it, surprise flickering across his face. Lena, can I come in? Of course. She stepped inside. His room was dark except for the lamp by his bed. He'd been reading. A book lay open on the nightstand. Thank you, Lena said, for the room. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do, because it matters. You listened. You saw what I needed, and you gave it to me. Damien's expression softened. I'm trying. I know. Lena stepped closer. And I'm sorry for pushing you away. I was hurt and angry, and I needed time. But I've had time, and I've decided something. What? I'm done running. Done holding back, done protecting myself from something that might actually be real. She reached for his hand. I'm all in, Damien, completely. And that terrifies me. But I'm doing it anyway. Damien pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I won't let you down. Yes, you will, because you're human and you screw up. We both do. She pulled back just enough to look at him. But we keep trying, together. Together, he agreed. She kissed him then, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. And when he kissed her back, desperate and relieved, Lena felt something click into place. This wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was theirs, and that was enough. The shift between them was subtle but undeniable. After that night, something fundamental changed. Not overnight, not in some dramatic transformation, but slowly, like ice melting into water, the careful distance they'd maintained began to dissolve. Damien stopped sleeping in his own room. He'd knock on her door around midnight, wait for her to answer, and then just stand there like he was asking permission. Lena never turned him away. They'd fall asleep tangled together, and she'd wake to find him already awake, watching her with an expression she was starting to recognize as wonder. "You do that a lot," she murmured one morning. "Do what?" "Stare at me like I'm going to disappear." Damien's fingers traced her jawline. "Because part of me still doesn't believe you're real." "I'm very real." "I know. That's the terrifying part." They talked more. Not just surface conversations, but real ones. About childhoods that had shaped them in different ways. About fears they'd never voiced. About the future neither of them had thought they'd want. Lena told him about her mother, who died when she was 12. About how her father had shut down after that, becoming a ghost in his own house. About how she'd learned to be invisible because being seen meant being disappointing. Damien told her about his father's lessons in cruelty. About the first time he'd watched a man die and how he'd thrown up in the bathroom afterward while his father called him weak. About the weight of expectation that had been pressing down on him since he was old enough to understand what his last name meant. "We're both pretty damaged," Lena said one night, her head on his chest. "Probably too damaged for this to work. Definitely too damaged." She felt him laugh beneath her cheek. "But we're trying anyway. Foolish of us." "Completely." His hand stroked her hair. "I don't know how to do this right. The husband thing, the partnership thing. Neither do I, so we figure it out together. What if I screw it up? Then I'll tell you, and you'll fix it, and we'll move forward." She tilted her head to look at him. "That's what people do, right? They mess up, and they fix it, and they keep going." "I think so. I've never actually seen it work." "Me neither. So we'll be pioneers." Damien's smile was soft in the darkness. "Pioneers. Revolutionary even. You're making fun of me." "Little bit." He kissed the top of her head, and Lena felt her chest tighten with something she wasn't ready to name yet. But it was there. Growing. Undeniable. 2 weeks later, everything came to a head with Vitor. Lena was in her reading room when she heard raised voices from downstairs. She set down her book and moved to the door, listening. Damien's voice was controlled but tight. Another man's voice was aggressive, challenging. She made her way downstairs quietly, staying out of sight. They were in the main sitting room. Through the doorway, she could see Damien standing near the window, his posture rigid. Vittore was pacing, his face red with anger. 2 other men stood nearby, clearly Vittore's people. "You're destroying everything," Vittore spat. "Turning your back on tradition. On family." "I'm saving the family," Damien said. "You're just too blind to see it." "By going legitimate? By crawling to the authorities like a dog? By building something sustainable, something that won't collapse the moment someone decides to investigate?" "We've survived investigations before. By bribing officials and threatening witnesses. That's not survival, that's borrowed time." Damien's voice hardened. "And the time is running out. Either we adapt or we die. Then we die with honor." "There's no honor in stupidity." Vittore's hand moved to his jacket, and Lena's heart stopped. She saw the gesture, the threat. But before she could react, Damien moved. He was faster than she expected. One moment he was by the window, the next he had Vittore's arm twisted behind his back, a gun pressed to his uncle's temple. "Don't," Damien said quietly. "I really don't want to kill you, but I will if you make me." The 2 other men reached for their weapons, but Damien's voice cracked out. "Touch those guns and I paint the walls with his brain." Everyone froze. "You wouldn't," Vittore said, but his voice shook slightly. "Try me." Damien's expression was carved from ice. "I've been patient with you, tolerant, but you just threatened me in my own home. That's a line you don't get to cross. The family will never accept this. The family will accept whatever I tell them to accept. Because I hold the accounts. I hold the contacts. I hold the power." Damien pressed the gun harder. "And you hold nothing." Lena's hands were shaking. She'd never seen this version of Damien. Cold, lethal, completely in control. "You have 2 choices," Damien continued. "You can leave Milan tonight. Take a nice retirement somewhere warm. I'll make sure you're comfortable. Or you can keep fighting me, and I will dismantle you piece by piece until there's nothing left. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake. I'm just correcting it. The silence stretched out, taut and dangerous. Then Vittore said, "Fine, I'll go." Damien released him slowly, stepping back but keeping the gun trained. "Smart choice. You have 24 hours. After that, if I see you anywhere near this city, the deal is off." Vittore straightened his jacket, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Damien's voice was flat. "It's been over since the moment you walked in here. You just didn't know it yet." Vittore and his men left. The front door slammed. Lena heard cars starting, driving away. Then Damien sagged against the wall, the gun dropping to his side. Lena stepped into the room. "Damien!" He looked up, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." She crossed to him, took the gun from his hand, and set it on the table. "Are you okay?" "I just threatened to kill my uncle." "He threatened you first. That doesn't make it better." Damien ran a hand through his hair. "This is my life, Lena. This is what I am. Violence and threats and power plays." "No." Lena took his face in her hands. "That's what you do to survive. It's not what you are." "How can you say that? You just saw—" "I saw you protect yourself. Protect us. Protect what you're trying to build." She held his gaze. "And I saw you give him a choice. You could have killed him, but you didn't. I wanted to. But you didn't. That's what matters." Damien pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." She felt him laugh against her hair, shaky and relieved. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "With Vittore?" "For now, he'll go. He's a coward at heart. And once the family sees I stood up to him, they'll fall in line. And if they don't, then I handle it, like I always do." Lena pulled back to look at him. "We handle it, remember? Partners." Something shifted in his expression, softened. "Partners. So what's next?" Damien exhaled slowly. "Next, I make some calls. Shore up support. Make sure everyone knows Vittore is out. Then—" He hesitated. "Then what?" "Then we focus on us, on building something real instead of just surviving." Lena's heart did that complicated thing again. "I'd like that." "Me too." They stood there in the quiet house, holding each other, and Lena realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Damien, not of his world, not even of the feelings growing stronger every day. She was ready, for all of it. 3 weeks later, Lena missed her period. At first, she didn't think much of it. Stress could do that. And the past few months had been nothing but stress. But then a week went by. Then 2. And the exhaustion she'd been feeling wasn't going away. She bought a test. 5 of them, actually, because one didn't seem like enough. They all came back positive. Lena sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the little plastic sticks lined up on the counter, and tried to process what this meant. She was pregnant. They'd done it, fulfilled the contract's terms, the family was secure. The marriage was solid. She should be relieved. Instead, she felt terrified, because this was real now. Not just a contract or an obligation. There was a life growing inside her, a child who would tie her to Damien and his world forever. A child who deserved better than parents who'd started as a business transaction. Lena didn't know how long she sat there, long enough that her legs went numb, long enough that she heard Damien come home, calling her name. "Lena? You up here?" She couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up. Footsteps in the hallway. Then he was there, standing in the bathroom doorway. His eyes went to the tests on the counter, to her face, back to the tests. "Is that—" His voice cracked. "Are you—" Lena nodded. Damien's legs seemed to give out. He sank down beside her on the floor, staring at the tests like they were written in a language he didn't understand. "We're having a baby," he said. "Yes, a baby. That's generally what positive tests mean." He turned to look at her, and his expression was completely unguarded. Wonder and terror and joy all mixed together. "How do you feel?" "Scared, Overwhelmed, kind of nauseous, actually. That's normal, right? The nausea? I think so. Lena leaned her head against his shoulder. Are you happy? I don't know. Damien's hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. I don't have words for what I am. Terrified? Definitely terrified. Me too. They sat there on the bathroom floor, hands linked, processing the enormity of what was happening. I don't know how to be a father, Damien said quietly. I don't know how to be a mother. We're going to screw this up so badly. Probably, Lena squeezed his hand. But we'll screw it up together. And we'll figure it out. Like we've been figuring everything else out. Damien turned to her, his eyes shining. I'm going to love this kid so much. I know. And I'm going to protect them from everything. From my world. From the violence. From all of it. You can't protect them from everything. Watch me try. Lena smiled despite her fear. You're already being an overprotective father, and the baby isn't even the size of a grape yet. I don't care. This is my child. Our child. He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. I'm going to give them everything I never had. Safety, choices, a chance to be something other than this. What if they want to be part of this world? Then we deal with it. But I'm going to make damn sure they have options. Lena covered his hand with hers. We're really doing this. We really are. No going back now. I wouldn't want to. Damien leaned in, kissing her softly. I love you, Lena. The words hit her like a freight train. She pulled back, staring at him. What? I love you. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was scared. And I didn't know how, but I'm saying it now. His thumb brushed her cheek. I love you. Not because of the contract. Not because you're having my child. Just because you're you. Lena's eyes burned with tears. You're terrible at timing. I know. We're sitting on a bathroom floor. I know. Surrounded by pea sticks. Also aware of that. She laughed through her tears. I love you too, even though you're an idiot. Damien grinned. I'll take it. He kissed her again, and Lena felt something settle in her chest. Not fear, not uncertainty, just rightness. This was where she was supposed to be, with him, building this strange, imperfect life together, and somehow that was more than enough. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Morning sickness hit hard, lasting well past the first trimester. Lena spent weeks feeling like her body was staging a revolt. Damien handled it better than she expected, holding her hair back when she got sick, bringing her crackers and ginger tea, never complaining when she snapped at him for breathing too loudly. You're being too nice, she muttered one particularly bad morning. Would you prefer I be mean? I'd prefer you stop looking at me like I'm made of glass. You're growing a human. That's pretty much the definition of fragile. I'm going to throw this cracker at you. Please don't. Maria just cleaned. Despite the discomfort, there were good moments, like when they went for the first ultrasound and saw the heartbeat. Damien had gripped her hand so tightly she lost circulation, but she didn't complain. Just watched him stare at the screen with tears streaming down his face. Or when Isabella visited and actually smiled, a real smile, when they told her the news. Finally, some good news from you two. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Mother, Damien said dryly. You've earned it. Isabella's gaze softened slightly. You're doing well, both of you. It was the closest thing to approval Lena had ever gotten from her mother-in-law. She'd take it. The months passed. Lena's body changed, expanding in ways that fascinated and horrified her. Damien was obsessed with her growing belly, constantly touching it, talking to it, reading to it. You know the baby can't actually understand Italian yet, right? Lena said one night. They need to be bilingual. We're starting early. They don't have ears yet. Details. Lena smiled, running her fingers through his hair while he pressed his ear to her stomach. You're going to be such a ridiculous father. I'm going to be the best father this kid could ask for. Confident. Determined. He looked up at her. I meant what I said. This child is going to have choices. A real life. Not the one I had. I know. Lena's hand found his cheek. And they're going to be so loved by both of us. Spoiled, probably. Definitely spoiled. Worth it. Completely worth it. At 6 months, they found out they were having a girl. Damien cried. Actually cried right there in the doctor's office. The technician pretended not to notice while Lena held his hand and tried not to cry herself. "A daughter," Damien whispered. "We're having a daughter." "We are." "I don't know how to raise a girl." "Good thing you have me then." He laughed through his tears. "She's going to be just like you, strong and stubborn and completely terrifying." "I hope so." That night, they talked about names. Not seriously at first, just throwing ideas around while lying in bed, Damien's hand on Lena's stomach. "What about Isabella?" he suggested. "After your mother." "Why not?" "Because she'll expect the baby to be born in a power suit." Damien laughed. "Fair point." "What about Elena? After my mother?" He considered it. "Elena Falco. It's pretty. But I want her to have her own name, not carry the weight of someone else's history." Lena understood that. "So something new. Something that's just hers." They settled on Sophia. Simple, classic, not tied to either of their pasts. Sophia Falco, their daughter. At 8 months, Lena could barely move without feeling like she was carrying a boulder. Damien had started working from home more, refusing to leave her alone for long. "I'm pregnant, not dying," Lena said for the 100th time. "I know, but humor me." "You're being ridiculous." "I'm being careful." He helped her sit down on the couch, propping pillows behind her. "What do you need?" "For you to stop hovering." "Not happening. Try again." "Ice cream, the good kind." "Done." He headed for the kitchen, and Lena watched him go with a mix of exasperation and affection. This was her life now. A husband who loved her too much. A baby on the way. A home that finally felt like one. It wasn't what she'd planned, wasn't what she'd wanted when this whole nightmare started. But somehow, it had become everything she needed. Sophia arrived 3 weeks early, screaming and perfect. The labor was brutal. 18 hours of pain that made Lena understand why people said childbirth was a marathon. Damien stayed with her the entire time, letting her squeeze his hand until his fingers went numb, never once complaining. "I hate you," Lena gasped between contractions. "I know. This is your fault. Technically, it takes two—" "Don't. Don't you dare." Noted. When Sophia finally arrived, tiny and red-faced and furious at being evicted from her comfortable home, Lena forgot all the pain. Just stared at this perfect little person they'd made. Damien was a mess, complete disaster. He held Sophia like she was made of glass, tears streaming down his face, completely undone. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's beautiful," Lena agreed, exhausted but happy. "She has your eyes. She has your stubborn chin." "Poor kid," Lena laughed, wincing. "She's ours." "She's ours," Damien repeated, wonder in his voice. They took her home 2 days later. The house had been transformed, a nursery painted soft yellow, a crib that Damien had assembled himself, with significant cursing, more baby supplies than any one child could possibly need. The first few weeks were chaos. Sophia didn't sleep. When she did sleep, Lena and Damien were too anxious to sleep themselves, constantly checking that she was still breathing. They were exhausted, overwhelmed, and completely in over their heads. And Lena had never been happier. She watched Damien change diapers with intense concentration, like it was a business negotiation. Watched him pace the hallway at 2 a.m, rocking Sophia and singing off-key Italian lullabies. Watched him transform from the cold, calculated man she'd married into a father who was completely, hopelessly in love with his daughter. "You're staring again," Damien said one night, catching her watching him feed Sophia. "Can't help it." "Why?" "Because you're different. With her." "How?" "Softer, gentler, more human." Damien smiled down at their daughter. "She makes me want to be better." "You already are better." "Not good enough, not yet." He looked up at Lena. "I'm going to give her everything, not money, not power, just love, safety, freedom to be whoever she wants to be." "I know you will. And I'm going to love her mother every single day for the rest of my life." Lena's throat tightened. "You're getting sappy." "I'm allowed. I have the daughter. Sappiness comes with the territory." Apparently. 6 months later, Damien officially transitioned the family business. It took months of negotiations, meetings, and careful restructuring. But he did it. Moved everything into legitimate holdings, real estate, import-export, investments that didn't require looking over his shoulder. Vittore was gone. The old guard had either adapted or retired. And the Falco name, for the first time in generations, wasn't synonymous with violence. It wasn't perfect. There were still gray areas, still connections to the old world that couldn't be completely severed. But it was progress. And Damien slept better because of it. Worth it? Lena asked one night, after a particularly brutal day of meetings. Completely. He pulled her closer, Sophia asleep between them. I want her to be proud of me, of where she comes from. She will be, because you chose to change. That takes more courage than just accepting what you were born into. You make me braver. You were always brave. You just didn't know it. They lay there in the quiet darkness, their daughter breathing softly between them, and Lena realized something. She'd been wrong. All those months ago when she thought this was about survival, about protecting herself, about getting through a year and then walking away. This was never about survival. It was about learning that sometimes the things we're forced into become the things we choose, that contracts can become commitments, that transactions can transform into something real. She'd been sold into this marriage, but she'd chosen to stay, chosen to build something with a man who'd been as broken as she was, chosen to fight for a future that neither of them had thought they deserved. And somehow, against all odds, they'd made it work. 1 year later, they renewed their vows, not because the contract required it, because they wanted to. It was small, intimate. Just them, Sophia, Maria, Isabella, and a handful of people who actually mattered. No lawyers, no business associates, just family. They stood in the garden of the Milan house, the same garden where Lena had sat by the fountain and wondered if she'd survive this, where Damien had first told her he was falling for her, where they'd built something real out of the wreckage of a transaction. The officiant was kind, not looking at them like they were a business deal. And when it was time for the vows, Damien took Lena's hands. I know we already did this once, he said, badly, in a chapel with people who didn't care, but this time I'm choosing you, not because I have to, because I want to, because you're the bravest, strongest, most infuriating person I've ever met, and I want to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Lena's eyes burned. Your turn to be sappy. Our daughter made me soft. Good. Lena squeezed his hands. I choose you too, even though you're controlling and overprotective and terrible at letting people in. You let me in. You gave me a home when I didn't have one, a family when I'd lost mine, a future I didn't know I wanted. So yeah, I choose you, every day, for the rest of our lives. They kissed, and Sophia, being held by Isabella, squealed with delight. She approves, Damien murmured against Lena's lips. Of course she does. She's smart like her mother, and stubborn like her father. We're in so much trouble when she's older. Completely doomed. They pulled apart, laughing, and Lena looked around at the small group gathered, at Isabella, who was actually smiling, at Maria, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, at Sophia, reaching for them with chubby hands. This was her family now. Strange and complicated and nothing like what she'd imagined. But it was real. It was hers, and she wouldn't change a single thing. That night, after everyone had left and Sophia was asleep, Damien and Lena sat on the terrace with wine. Do you ever regret it? Damien asked. The way we started? Lena considered the question. Sometimes, when I think about what my life could have been if my father hadn't sold me, if I'd had choices. I'm sorry for that. Don't be. Because the truth is, I don't know if I would have chosen better. I was raised to be ornamental, to marry well and look pretty and never ask questions. At least this gave me a chance to become someone real. You were always real. No, I was performing, playing a role. You made me stop. How? By refusing to let me hide. By demanding honesty even when it was ugly. By being just as broken as I was. She turned to look at him. We saved each other, Damien, in the weirdest, most dysfunctional way possible. He pulled her closer, kissing her temple. Best transaction I ever made. Romantic. I try. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Milan spread out below them. I want to start a foundation, Lena said suddenly. Damien looked at her. What kind of foundation? For women. Women who are trapped the way I was. In bad situations, bad marriages, bad debts. I want to give them options, resources, a way out. That's a good idea. You think? I think it's perfect, and I'll help however I can. Lena smiled. Thank you. For what? For letting me turn our nightmare into something useful, something good. Our nightmare turned into a family, into love, into the best thing that's ever happened to me. Damien's hand found hers. I'd say that's already pretty good. Lena laced their fingers together, feeling the weight of his wedding ring against her skin. She'd been sold, traded, forced into a marriage she never wanted. But somewhere along the way, she'd found freedom. Not in leaving, but in staying, in fighting, in choosing to build something real with a man who'd been just as lost as she was. Love wasn't supposed to start with a contract, with negotiation and terms and obligations. But sometimes the best things in life came from the places you least expected. From the people who challenged you, broke you open, and helped you become who you were always meant to be. Damien had done that for her, and she'd done it for him. Together, they'd turned a transaction into a marriage, a contract into a commitment, obligation into love. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't perfect. They still fought, still struggled, still had moments where the darkness of his world threatened to swallow them whole, but they faced it together. And that made all the difference. Lena leaned her head on Damien's shoulder, watching the city lights blur into stars, and thought about everything they'd overcome, everything they'd built, everything that waited for them in the future. Their daughter sleeping peacefully inside. The foundation they'd create to help others. The life they'd continue building, day by day, choice by choice. She'd started this journey in silence, traded like property, with no voice and no power. She was ending it with both. And somewhere in between she'd found something she'd never expected. Not just survival, but home.